let's begin. So you want to be a witch. You're picturing the cool kind, right? Flying on broomsticks, commanding demons, turning your high school bully into a slightly more intelligent newt, maybe getting a moody cat familiar. It all sounds very empowering. Unfortunately, this is not that. This is Salem Village, Massachusetts. The year is 1692, and congratulations, you've just been accused. Being a witch in Salem doesn't mean you have powers. It means you're the town's brand new non-consensual scapegoat. Your new job description includes being tortured, having your property seized, and getting publicly executed. All because a 12-year-old girl you've never met suddenly got a really bad stomach ache and decided your spectral form did it. Forget the romantic velvet-clad version of witchcraft. The reality of 1692 is a legal and social nightmare from which you cannot wake up. It's a world where your guilt is assumed, your only defense is impossible, and your entire community is basically a 50-person circular firing squad. Let's explore why being a witch in Salem was, without question, the worst job in history. Welcome to the worst HOA in history. Before a single person was accused of witchcraft, Salem Village was already a festering pit of paranoia, jealousy, and religious-fueled anxiety. This wasn't a happy-go-lucky pioneer town. This was a miserable, freezing cold backwoods settlement filled with people who were just waiting for an excuse to tear each other apart. First, you have the geography of the feud. Salem was literally a town divided. You had Salem Town, the coastal port where the wealthy, cosmopolitan merchants lived, and then you had Salem Village, the farming community 5 miles inland where the poorer, more traditional Puritans lived. The village farmers felt the town merchants were getting rich, ignoring their needs and becoming worldly and corrupt. The town merchants thought the village farmers were a bunch of backward-thinking, superstitious hillbillies. It was a classic class war, and the tension was so thick you could cut it with a buckled hat. Then you have the local politics. The village itself was ripped in half by a toxic rivalry between two families, the Putnams and the Porters. This wasn't a friendly disagreement. This was a multi-generational corporate blood feud, but with cows and timber rights instead of stock options. The Putnams were old money farmers who felt their power was slipping. The Porters were new money entrepreneurs. When the village hired a new minister, Reverend Samuel Parris, a failed merchant from Barbados, the Putnams backed him, and the Porters hated him. This fight over the minister's salary and firewood allowance literally split the village church down the middle. Now drop yourself into this. You're a Puritan. You 100% believe the devil is real, tangible, and actively trying to recruit you, probably from that patch of woods just behind your house. Your city charter from England has just been revoked, leaving you legally unprotected. You're terrified of constant, brutal raids from local tribes in King William's War. Your existence is cold, hard, and defined by the absolute certainty that most of you are going to hell. In this world, bad luck doesn't exist. If your cow gets sick, it's not a bacterial infection, it's maleficium. If your crops fail, it's not a drought, it's a curse. And if a child gets a fever, it's not influenza, it's witchcraft. This place wasn't just a tinderbox. It was a tinderbox soaked in gasoline, actively arguing about who should get to hold the match. It starts in the kitchen of that controversial minister, Reverend Parris. His 9-year-old daughter, Betty, and his 11-year-old niece, Abigail Williams, start having, fits. They're screaming, throwing things, contorting into impossible positions, barking like dogs, and complaining of being pinched and bitten by invisible forces. The local doctor, who has all the medical knowledge of a boiled potato, examines them and gives his professional diagnosis. The evil hand is upon them. When the girls are pressured to name who is afflicting them, they don't point to the powerful people who are actually feuding. They point to the bottom of the social ladder. Sarah Good, a homeless beggar. Sarah Osborne, an old widow who was shacking up with her indentured servant. And Tituba, Reverend Paris's enslaved woman from Barbados. The central piece of evidence used to convict you is the most brilliant and most horrifying legal innovation of the 17th century: spectral evidence. Spectral evidence is simply testimony that your ghost did it. Imagine you're on trial. A teenage girl points at you and starts screaming that your specter, your invisible spirit form, has flown across the courtroom, is currently sitting on a ceiling beam, and is ordering a yellow bird to bite her. The magistrates, including the notoriously hanging happy Judge William Stoughton, turn to you and ask you to explain. What can you possibly say? Nuh-huh, you have no defense. How do you find an alibi for your ghost? How do you cross-examine an invisible bird? You can't. It is the perfect, unfalsifiable accusation. It's he said, she ghosted. Anyone who questioned the logic of spectral evidence, hey wait, couldn't the devil just impersonate an innocent person's ghost, was immediately suspected of being a witch themselves for defending a witch. So congratulations, you're being tried for a crime your invisible doppelganger allegedly committed. The only witnesses are hysterical teenagers, and your defense attorney is absolutely nobody because you aren't allowed one. 3. The ultimate catch-22, confess or die. So you've been accused. Your ghost has been spotted doing spectral drive-bys all over town. You're dragged from your home, often in chains, and thrown into a squalid jail. But don't worry, you have one path to survival. It's the Salem Witch Trials' one and only loophole, and it's a masterpiece of psychological torture. All you have to do is confess. That's it. Just stand up in court, look the magistrates in the eye, and agree that yes, you are a witch. Admit that you signed the devil's book, that you flew on a pole to a witch's sabbath, that you used poppets to kill your neighbor's livestock, and that you've been tormenting these poor, innocent children. If you do that, you're golden. The court, believing it has broken the devil's hold on you and saved your soul, will spare your life. You'll remain in prison, probably indefinitely, but you won't be executed. There's just one tiny problem. You didn't do it. This is the central agonizing dilemma of 1692. The only way to survive is to lie. You have to perjure your soul before God, the one being you as a devout Puritan genuinely fear, to save your body from a lie told by your neighbors. But what if you're a person of integrity? What if, like Rebecca Nurse, you're a deeply pious 71-year-old grandmother known throughout the colony for your charity? What if you refuse to lie? Well, if you maintain your innocence, you are proving to the court that you are still in league with the devil. By refusing to confess, you are seen as an unrepentant sinner, a hardened witch whose soul is completely lost. And the penalty for that is death. This created a perfect inverse logic nightmare. The only people who were executed in Salem were the ones who insisted they were innocent. Every single person who confessed and named other witches was spared. The system was literally designed to execute the innocent and reward the liars. And let's talk about that naming names part. It wasn't enough to just confess for yourself. Oh no, the magistrates wanted the whole org chart. They'd lean in, their faces smelling of piety and bad teeth, and demand to know who you saw at the witch meeting. Who was the queen of hell? Who else signed the book? This is where the panic really exploded. It became a high-stakes spiritual game of tag you're it. To save their own lives, confessed witches started pointing fingers at everyone they'd ever had a property dispute with. Ann Putnam Jr., one of the lead accusers, ended up naming 62 people. This wasn't justice. It was a demonic Ponzi scheme where your only hope for survival was to recruit new victims from your own circle of friends. 4. Your day in court is a literal torture chamber. Let's assume you've decided to maintain your innocence. You noble, principled, and incredibly soon-to-be-dead fool, welcome to your examination. This isn't a trial as we know it. There's no innocent until proven guilty. This is an interrogation designed to produce a confession, and the entire room is against you. You're brought into the packed meeting house, which smells like sweat, desperation, and unwashed wool. You're facing the magistrates, like John Haythorne, a man so completely convinced of your guilt that he acts as both prosecutor and judge. But the real show is sitting in the front row, the afflicted girls. The moment you walk in, they collapse. They scream that you're blinding them, that your specter is stabbing them, that you're holding them to the fire. It's the 17th century equivalent of a stadium-level performance art piece, and you're the unwilling guest of honor. Hathorne points at you. What say you to this? Why do you hurt these children? You say, I am innocent. Bad move. The girls scream louder. They contort their bodies, their eyes rolling back. She's sending the devil! You're ordered to recite the Lord's Prayer. You're terrified, you're in chains, and a dozen people are barking like dogs. You stumble on a word. The crowd gasps. Proof, witches they all knew can't say the Lord's Prayer correctly. Then comes the physical exam. The court needs hard physical proof of your compact with Satan. You, and it was almost always women, are taken to a private room, stripped naked, and examined by a committee of your peers. They are looking for the witch's teat, any mole, skin tag, wart, or weird freckle that could be interpreted as the spot where your demonic familiar, your imp, came to suckle your blood. They poke and prod every inch of your body with sharp pins. If they find a spot that doesn't bleed or that you don't feel, perhaps because it's a simple callus or they missed, that's it. That's the devil's mark. And if that's not enough, they'll just torture you. Officially, torture wasn't legal as a form of punishment, but it was totally fine to use it to persuade you to confess. The most famous example was Giles Corey, an 81-year-old farmer. He refused to even enter a plea, likely so his property wouldn't be seized from his sons. To force him to talk, the sheriff laid him in a field, put a board on his chest, and slowly piled heavy stones on top of him. For 2 days they pressed him. His only response? More weight. He was pressed to death, crushed by the very legal system that was supposed to be protecting him. Your options, in short, are to lie, die, or get squished. 5, your new home, the disease-ridden dungeon. Let's say you've been examined, found to have a suspicious-looking mole, and are now awaiting your trial. You'll be spending the next few months in the cozy confines of Salem's prison. And by cozy confines, I mean a literal medieval dungeon that was probably condemned by medieval standards. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's a rich, complex bouquet of unwashed bodies, rotting food, human waste, and pure, unfiltered despair. The prisons in Boston and Salem were not designed for this many criminals. They were tiny, unheated stone basements. As the accusations piled up, these rooms became packed with dozens of people, all chained to the walls to prevent their specters from going on midnight joyrides. We're talking standing room only, but for misery. Now you might be thinking, at least I'll get a prison cot and 3 square meals, right? Oh, you sweet, naive fool. This is 17th century New England, not a Swedish correctional facility. You have to pay for everything. That's right. You are charged a fee for the privilege of being imprisoned. You have to pay the jailer for your food. You have to pay for your water. You have to pay for your blankets. You even have to pay for the chains they bolt you into. If you run out of money, well, your family better bring you food or you starve. This system created a horrific reality where the poorest prisoners, like Sarah Good, were slowly dying of malnutrition and exposure before they even got to trial. Her own infant daughter, born in the jail, died of the cold. Another accused, Ann Foster, died in chains after 7 months in this pit. And who are your new roommates? They're the very people who accused you. The afflicted were often kept in the same rooms as the witches, which, as you can imagine, was great for everyone's mental health. You'd be trying to sleep in a freezing puddle of your own filth, only to be woken up by a 17-year-old having a screaming fit, claiming your ghost was currently trying to make her sign the devil's book. The jailer would then wake you up by kicking you, demanding you stop your spectral assault. You are cold, you are starving, and you are surrounded by the sights and sounds of human suffering. The dysentery is rampant. The gale fever, typhus, is killing people faster than the executioner can. You are in constant agonizing pain from the iron chains which you're never ever taken out of. You are, in every meaningful sense, in hell, and you haven't even been convicted yet. 6. Bankrupted, banished, and blacklisted. But the legal system isn't the only thing trying to destroy you. The second your name is uttered by an accuser, your entire life is systematically dismantled by the community. First, your property is seized. The sheriff, George Corwin, a man who really seemed to enjoy his job, would ride to your farm, often right after you were dragged away. He wasn't just there to put a lien on the house, he was there to liquidate. His men would seize your land, your furniture, and your tools. They would storm your barn and lead away your cows, your pigs, and your oxen. They'd take the hay from your fields and the corn from your silo. By law, they were supposed to leave your family with enough to survive. In practice, Corwin and his deputies picked your entire life clean, like vultures on a carcass. Your family, who just watched you get hauled off as a witch, is now destitute. They are homeless, foodless, and have no way to plant crops for the next season. Next up, your social and spiritual execution. You are formally excommunicated from the church. This is a much bigger deal than just not being allowed to attend the potluck. In a Puritan theocracy, the church is the state. It's your government, your social club, and your only path to salvation. Excommunication means you are no longer a person. You are a heathen and a publican. You are spiritually dead. Your friends are forbidden from speaking to you. Your family is encouraged to shun you. If you die, you will not be given a Christian burial. Your name is struck from the book of life. You are, in the eyes of God and everyone you've ever known, utterly and completely damned. So let's review. You're in a freezing septic tank of a jail. Your family is starving. Your farm has been stolen. And the entire town, including your own minister, has publicly declared that your soul belongs to Satan. All of this before you've had a chance to defend yourself against the ghost stories of a teenager you once told to stop running in church. And you thought your last performance review was unfair. After months of festering in that frozen, typhus-ridden jail, your big day finally arrives. The Court of Oyer and Terminer, which literally means to hear and determine, has heard your case and determined that you are in fact 100% witch. Your execution date is set. You are paraded from the jail, through the town, and up the dusty path to a barren, rocky hill just outside the village. The sign just calls it Gallows Hill, which is at least very clear branding. The entire town has turned out for this, not in mourning, but in excitement. This is their 17th century Super Bowl, and you're the halftime show. You're brought to the gallows, which isn't some elaborate platform. It's likely just a sturdy tree branch or a simple wooden crossbeam. The noose is slipped over your neck. This is your last chance. The local minister, perhaps the famous Cotton Mather himself, will be right there at the ladder, not to offer you comfort, but to offer you one final high-pressure sales pitch. He will plead with you, beg you, command you to confess, to admit your guilt, save your soul, and validate the court's decision. Imagine the scene. This is Reverend George Burroughs, himself an accused minister. He stands on the gallows, a rope around his neck, and does the one thing a witch is supposedly incapable of. He recites the Lord's Prayer from beginning to end perfectly, without a single stumble. The crowd is stunned. They start to mutter, "This is an innocent man. This is a mistake. This whole thing is a mistake. The execution might actually be stopped." And then Cotton Mather, sitting on his horse, shouts down the crowd. He reminds them that the devil himself can appear as an angel of light. that this perfect prayer is not proof of innocence, but the devil's greatest trick. The crowd is reassured, the executioner kicks the ladder, Burroughs swings, and you're next. Don't expect a quick, humane neck snap. This is not a modern long drop execution. This is 17th century short drop hanging. The fall is just a few inches. The rope doesn't break your neck, it just tightens. You are left to dangle, kicking and spasming for several long, agonizing minutes as you slowly, publicly, and very painfully strangle to death. 8. Your legacy is a ditch. So you're dead. You've been choked to death in front of a jeering crowd that is now probably wandering off to get a beer. The nightmare is finally over, right? Oh no. The final humiliation is yet to come. As a convicted witch, you are a spiritual outlaw. You have been excommunicated from the church, and therefore from the grace of God. You do not, under any circumstances, get a Christian burial. Your body is considered nothing more than a contaminated piece of spiritual garbage. After you've finished convulsing and are finally officially dead, the sheriff cuts your body down. Your family is not allowed to claim you. They are not allowed to wash you, dress you, or place you in a pine box. You are denied the dignity of a coffin, a funeral, or even a simple gravestone. Instead, your body is dragged or just unceremoniously rolled into a shallow, unmarked crevice between the rocks somewhere on Gallows Hill. This is the final act of erasure. You are not to be mourned, remembered, or visited. You are to be treated like refuse, dumped in a common pit with the other witches, and left to rot. This was the fate of Rebecca Nurse, John Proctor, and Martha Corey. They were just thrown away. The only mercy shown was the one families took for themselves. There are many accounts and strong local legends that the families of the victims, under the cover of total darkness, snuck back up Gallows Hill later that night. They would have had to dig through the shallow grave with their bare hands, find their mother or wife or father, and secretly carry their body away. They would then rebury them in an unmarked grave on their own family property in some secret corner of the farm. This was the only way to give their loved ones a shred of dignity, an illegal midnight grave robbing of their own family, just so they wouldn't be left on a barren hill like a dead animal. So, best case scenario, you're crushed by rocks. Worst case scenario, you're publicly strangled, and your grieving children have to steal your corpse in the middle of the night. 9. The morning after, the great Puritan hangover. So what stops this runaway train of homicidal piety? Well, like all great moral panics, it just burns itself out. By the autumn of 1692, the accusers got a little too ambitious. They started pointing fingers at people who were untouchable. The wealthy, the well-connected, the wife of the governor of Massachusetts himself, Lady Mary Phipps. Suddenly, Governor Phipps, who had been totally fine with this whole thing when it was just poor farmers and social outcasts, had a come-to-Jesus moment. He looked at the mountain of corpses, the overflowing jails, and the fact that his own wife was now implicated, and finally decided, maybe spectral evidence is, and I'm just spitballing here, complete and utter bullcrap. In October 1692, he dissolved the court of Oyer and Terminer. It was like flipping a switch. He replaced it with a new superior court of judicature and gave them one simple rule: no more ghost stories. Spectral evidence was out. The results were immediate. The next wave of trials began, and without their star witness, the invisible bird-commanding specter, the prosecutions fell apart. Of the 56 people tried by the new court, 49 were immediately acquitted. The few who were found guilty were quickly pardoned by Governor Phipps. The jails were emptied, the executions stopped. The great delusion which had consumed the colony for nearly a year evaporated. The final body count, 19 people hanged on Gallows Hill. One man, Giles Corey, pressed to death. At least 5 more, including an infant, dead in the dungeons. And lest we forget, 2 dogs also executed for witchcraft. Yes, dogs. And now came the really awkward part, the hangover. The village had to wake up, look at its neighbors, and come to terms with the fact that they had just murdered 20 of their own citizens in a fit of collective religious hysteria. The apologies were, to put it mildly, pathetic and slow. It took 5 years for the colony to issue a day of fasting and humiliation, which was basically a public whoops. Judge Samuel Sewell stood up in church and had his apology read, admitting his blame and shame. But the main judge, William Stoughton, the one who signed all the death warrants, he never apologized for a single thing and died a rich, respected man. And the accusers? In 1706, Ann Putnam Jr., one of the most prolific accusers, gave a public apology. She blamed a great delusion of Satan for misleading her into accusing innocent people. It was the ultimate 17th century, "I'm sorry you feel that way," passing the buck to the one guy who couldn't be put on trial. It took until 1711 for the colony to reverse the attainders, the convictions, for some of the victims, and pay their families a pittance in restitution. But some families were just missed. The last victim of the Salem Witch Trials, Elizabeth Johnson Jr., wasn't officially exonerated until 2022. It took 329 years for the state of Massachusetts to finally clear her name. So, your final job review as a Salem witch. You are tortured, you are socially executed, your family is bankrupted, you are slowly strangled to death in front of a cheering crowd, and your corpse is dumped in a ditch. And 300 years later, a politician signs a bill that basically says, "Our bad." And that's why the good old days were, in fact, objectively terrible. Subscribe for more shattered illusions.